Welcome. Tonight I will tell you about one day in the life of a Chernobyl liquidator in 1986. Make yourself comfortable, save this video, and listen at an even pace as you drift into sleep. We will move through the day step by step. Morning checks, briefing, transport to the zone, short tasks on site, decontamination, evening routine, and rest. This is a calm, factual account without dramatization. If it helps you relax, please like and save the video for later. Now, let us begin. Summer 1986. Liquidation work is carried out inside the exclusion zone around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The day is planned in advance. A target area is assigned. The task is to reduce contamination on selected surfaces, secure access routes, move contaminated material to temporary storage points, and prepare the site for the next operation. A small team is formed. It includes several workers, a dosimetrist, and a designated team leader. The place of work is shown on a map. Landmarks, safe approaches, clean corridors for withdrawal, and control points for communication and measurements are marked before departure. The role of the liquidator is defined by an order and by entries in access documents. The person can be assigned as a construction worker, a road worker, a rigger, a signalman, or a dosimetrist, depending on training and the needs of the day. Subordination is direct. The team member follows the instructions of the team leader. The team leader reports to the shift chief. The shift chief reports to the section head. The reporting format is short and fixed: time, place, action, instrument readings, and needs. Extra commentary is avoided. Radio messages use a prepared call sign and a single channel set for the shift. Backup options for communication are agreed at the morning briefing. The daily regimen is stable. It includes wake-up, a brief medical check, safety instruction, equipment issue, transport into the 30-kilometer zone, checkpoint procedures, primary dosimetry at the site, work cycles with intermediate control, sanitary processing, return through the checkpoint, evening medical control, and documentation. Each stage has a time window and a responsible person. Records are made in several logs: personal dose log, work performed log, time spent in high reading spots, acceptance of the processed sector, and equipment issue and return. Discrepancies are corrected before the shift is closed. Access control divides the territory into zones. The outer boundary is the 30-kilometer line. Inner boundaries mark local sectors near the plant and along roads, roofs, yards, and technical areas. Entry requires an identity document, a pass, and a time mark. Clean and dirty routes are separated. Tools and materials that have been in a dirty sector are not carried into clean corridors. Movement is one-directional where possible to avoid recontamination of already processed paths. Rest points and water points are placed on the clean side and are signed on the ground. Unauthorized deviation from the route is not allowed. The main risks are external gamma radiation, beta-active dust on clothing and skin, inhalation of contaminated particles, and transfer of contamination by tools and vehicles. Physical strain under protective clothing is an additional factor. Heat load increases under a respirator and protective suit. Time at a hotspot is therefore limited by schedule, by instrument readings, and by physical tolerance under gear. Risk reduction measures are standard. The shortest possible stay in high fields, work in small steps, wetting surfaces before mechanical action, a fixed sequence of movements without return over footprints, constant use of gloves and a respirator, and repeated checks of respirator fit. If the person's condition worsens, the team leader is informed, and the person moves to a clean line for observation. Dose limits are set by orders valid for the period. An individual dosimeter is issued before departure. It is worn at the specified position on the body. Readings are taken on a schedule and entered in the personal card by the dosimetrist or the team leader. Group instruments are used to scan the site, to check the effect of decontamination, and to confirm local exceedances. Time in sectors with elevated background is limited by the plan and by real-time readings. For short entries to a hotspot, 2 people are assigned, the executor and the watcher with a stopwatch and a log. The sequence is fixed: approach, action, withdrawal. When the daily dose limit is reached, the person is withdrawn from work and replaced. Communication is kept simple. Radio traffic is brief. A standard format is used: call sign, location, current action, readings, request or status. Long exchanges are avoided. Hand signals are applied near moving machinery when radio is unclear. If interference appears on the channel, a fallback method is used: a runner to the nearest post or a wired handset if installed on the site. The time for routine reports is fixed to reduce channel congestion. Tools and materials are prepared according to the plan. For decontamination, there are brushes, scrapers, shovels, water containers, measured amounts of detergent, plastic film, and marked sacks. For shielding, simple screens and sheets are available when needed. For waste, there are containers and heavy sacks with labels. Protective clothing includes a suit, gloves, boots, or disposable overshoes, a head covering, goggles, and a respirator with the correct filter type. Spare filters and gloves are counted and placed at the team's temporary base. Water is rationed. Refill points are marked on the map. The procedure for changing filters and gloves is explained to every member during the morning instruction. The map is used throughout the day. It shows the entry route, the sector boundaries, the current processing grid, storage points for removed material, dosimetry checkpoints, the sanitary post, and the nearest vehicle staging area. Before work, the team leader shows the entry path and the exit path. Likely obstacles and the maneuver space for machinery are noted. Any change during the day is penciled on the working copy and then transferred to the clean map at the shift office after return. This avoids double processing and allows better planning for the next shift. Performance criteria for the day are clear. For a yard or a roof, the criterion is a decrease of readings to a target level or a defined percentage of the surface brought below the starting values. For a road, the criterion is a set length processed with confirmed reduction and with possible conditions for supply transport. For local hotspots, the criterion is removal or shielding of identified fragments followed by verification scanning. For lines of communication, the criterion is restoration of function on the assigned segment. Acceptance is done by the section senior in the presence of a dosimetrist. The result is recorded with numbers, not with general statements. Reporting is uniform. At the end of work, the team writes the actual volumes, the time windows for each operation, the water and detergent consumption, the number of sacks and containers filled, the instrument readings before and after treatment, and all deviations, tool failure, background increase, weather change, and route adjustments. These data feed the plan for the next day and the update of the contamination map. The report is delivered at the fixed time. After the report, the team proceeds to sanitary processing and returns to base. The organization of the day is strict by design. Tasks, routes, access levels, limits, protective means, communications, and success criteria are defined in advance. Responsibilities are assigned for every stage. Work is performed in short cycles with measurement and documentation between cycles. Dose is controlled by schedule and by instruments. Progress is visible in logs and on the map. This structure reduces uncertainty during the shift and supports a predictable flow from briefing to evening debrief. This closes the context of the day. After this, the morning sequence begins. Wake up, medical check, issue of equipment and dosimeters, transport formation, movement to the checkpoint, and entry into the zone for primary dosimetry and deployment at the site. Morning begins at a fixed time. The room is quiet. The person wakes when the duty officer turns on the lights and calls the shift. The bed is made. The blanket is folded. Personal items are placed in a small bag. A short self-check is performed. Skin for irritation, any cuts, blisters on the feet, signs of headache or dizziness. If something is noticed, it is reported to the medic before departure. If nothing is unusual, preparation continues without delay. Clothing is selected according to the weather and the plan for the day. A light base layer is used to absorb sweat. Socks are dry and without holes. The outer layer must allow movement under protective gear. At the medical post, the queue moves steadily. Blood pressure is measured. Pulse is counted. Temperature is taken when required by the schedule. The medic asks simple questions about sleep, appetite, and any pain. The answers are short and precise. The medic writes values in a log and marks the person as fit or in need of observation. If pressure is outside the allowed range, the person is held for a second reading after a few minutes. If readings are not acceptable, the person is reassigned to light duties or removed from the shift by the senior medic. The decision is logged and passed to the shift chief. Breakfast is served in a canteen with fixed seating. The food is simple and consistent. The portion is sufficient for several hours of physical work. Water or tea is provided. The person drinks at least 1 cup before departure to reduce the chance of dehydration. A second cup is allowed if time permits. If electrolyte powder has been issued, it is dissolved according to the label and consumed. No alcohol is allowed. Smoking is postponed until after work hours due to the rules of the site. After breakfast, dishes are returned and the table is wiped if this is the local rule. The person exits in an orderly line. The morning briefing takes place in a room or outside near the transport. The shift chief reads the day's assignment. The team leader repeats the objectives for the team. The map is shown with the sector boundaries marked in pencil. The entry route is traced with a finger. The exit route is also traced. Rest points and water points are identified. The locations of the sanitary post and the temporary base are confirmed. The time windows are stated: start, intermediate checks, and expected finish. The dose limits are repeated. The rule for short entries to hotspots is restated. Hand signals near machinery are reviewed. The call signs and the radio channel are stated again. The briefing is short. Questions are not encouraged unless something is unclear in a way that can affect safety or timing. The team acknowledges with a simple understood equipment issue follows. Protective clothing is handed out by size. Gloves are checked for tears and replaced if damaged. Boots or overshoes are inspected for cracks and holes. Goggles are tested for a clear field of view. The respirator is checked for correct type and filter. The person performs a fit check by covering the filter intake and inhaling. The mask must seal at the face. If it does not seal, the straps are adjusted or a different size is requested. A second pair of gloves and spare filters are placed in the team's box. Each item has a number. The number is written in the issue log next to the person's name. The person signs for receipt and responsibility. Instruments are issued at a separate table. The individual dosimeter number is recorded. The starting reading is noted. If it is a passive badge, it is placed in the indicated pocket. If it is an active device, the battery level is checked. The team dosimeter is turned on and its self-test is observed. The sounder is tested briefly and then set to a low volume. A second team instrument is carried by the team leader or the dosimetrist. The timepieces are synchronized. The team leader sets a wristwatch to the shift office clock. The others compare and adjust. The starting time is marked on the work plan. Tools are collected according to the assignment. Brushes, scrapers, shovels, sacks, plastic sheeting, and containers are counted. Water cans are filled and sealed. Detergent is measured and placed in labeled bottles. Tape and markers are added for labeling sacks and containers. A simple screen for shielding is placed on the truck if hotspot work is expected. The weight of the load is kept within limits for the vehicle. Nothing is left loose on the floor. The team checks that the tool list matches the assignment sheet. Any missing item is requested from the storekeeper. The storekeeper notes the outgoing items with numbers where applicable. Personal preparation is completed before boarding. Toenails and fingernails are checked for length to avoid tearing gloves. A cloth is placed at the heel if the boot rubs. A small amount of adhesive tape is used to secure sock tops. The cuffs of the base layer are smoothed to avoid folds under gloves. The respirator is kept around the neck or in a clean bag until entering the zone. The person carries no unnecessary objects. Personal documents are kept in a sealed sleeve. The pass is placed where it can be shown quickly. Money and valuables are left in storage if the facility provides it. The bed space is left in order. The transport lineup is announced. The team walks to the vehicle at a steady pace. Seats are taken according to the team leader's instruction. Heavy items are placed on the floor near the door for fast unloading at the site. The team leader checks the head count. The dosimetrist confirms that instruments are present. The driver receives the route sheet, the fuel status, and the rules for the day. Windows remain closed. Ventilation is set to internal circulation if available. The radio is tested once more. The call sign is acknowledged by the shift dispatcher. The convoy forms when all vehicles report ready. The movement to the checkpoint is controlled. The speed is moderate to avoid dust clouds. The vehicles keep distance. They do not pass each other unless instructed by the escort. Stops are made at designated pull-offs for a few minutes if needed for final checks. Conversation is kept low to allow clear hearing of the radio. The team leader repeats key points: entry route, first task, rest window, and fallback plan if readings exceed the plan. No changes are introduced without approval. The ride is used to conserve energy. The person keeps the back straight and feet flat to reduce fatigue. The checkpoint appears with signs and barriers. The escort signals where to stop. The team disembarks. Documents are prepared. The pass is shown. The duty officer compares names with the list. The time of entry is written in the log. The vehicle is inspected quickly. The driver remains with the vehicle unless told otherwise. The team stands in a designated area. The team leader confirms destination, approximate work time, and radio channel with the checkpoint officer. If the plan has changed, the updated map segment is issued. The team places respirators on the face and checks the seal again. Gloves are pulled on. Goggles are adjusted. The team forms a single file. Before passing the barrier, the dosimetrist takes a quick reading near the ground and at chest level on the clean side. The numbers are spoken aloud and noted in the small field notebook. This becomes the baseline for the day's log. The team leader looks at the sky and notes the wind direction and speed, because wind affects dust movement. If wind is high, the team will increase water use. If rain is present, the team expects less airborne dust but more mud and slower movement. The choice of route may be adjusted within the assigned sector to avoid standing water or soft ground. The entry itself is simple. The barrier is raised. The team steps through in the order given. The vehicle follows when the escort signals. Inside the zone, the road surface may be worn. The convoy speed remains low. The team watches for signs that mark clean corridors and dirty sectors. No one touches the roadside objects. The team leader points to the temporary base location on the ground when it is reached. The driver positions the vehicle so that unloading is fast and so that the exit path is not blocked. The engine is turned off. Wheel chocks are placed if the area is sloped. The team moves the tools to the temporary base and sets the water containers in shade if shade exists. Primary site deployment begins at once. The map is unfolded and placed on a clean board. The team leader aligns the map with visible landmarks. The dosimetrist walks a short grid around the planned work area and reports initial readings by voice. The values are written in the notebook with positions. The team marks clean and dirty lines with tape and signs. A small rest point is prepared on the clean side with water and a bench or a crate. The radio is checked for reception. The time of start is noted. The first cycle of work is selected. A defined patch of surface, a set length of road, or a specific item listed in the assignment. This completes the morning sequence. Wake up, medical check, breakfast, briefing, equipment and instrument issue, formation of transport, convoy movement, checkpoint procedures, entry into the zone and primary deployment at the site have been performed in the prescribed order. The team is now in position to begin measured work cycles under the plan and within the dose and time limits set for the day. The vehicle stops at the designated assembly point inside the sector. The team disembarks in the stated order and forms a short line facing the work area. The team leader points out the immediate landmarks, the safest approach, and the location of the temporary base. The dosimetrist prepares the survey instrument and waits a few seconds for a stable signal. The first reading is taken at chest height on the clean side to confirm the baseline from the checkpoint. A second reading is taken near the ground to register surface conditions. Both values are said aloud and written into the field notebook with time and position. The team leader repeats the time for the start of operations and confirms the sequence of the first tasks. The temporary base is established a few steps away from the clean corridor. A board or a crate is placed to keep the map off the ground. Water containers are moved into shade when shade is available. The tool bundles are opened and checked. Brushes, scrapers, shovels, and sacks are arranged for quick access. Detergent bottles are placed upright with caps tightened. Spare gloves and filters are set aside in a small box on the clean side. The radio is checked for a clear tone, and the agreed channel is verified. The wristwatch of the team leader is compared once more to the shift time. The dosimetrist confirms that the field notebook has enough pages for the day and that the pencil is sharpened. Weather is noted because it affects dust and visibility. Wind direction is observed by the drift of leaves or by a small ribbon fixed to a tool handle. If wind blows from the work area toward the rest point is moved. If wind shifts during work, the tape lines are adjusted and the water use is increased to suppress dust. If light rain begins, airborne dust is reduced but the ground becomes soft. Movement is slowed and routes avoid ruts. If fog reduces visibility, the team works in tighter formation and keeps line of sight at all times. Temperature is considered because heat under the respirator increases the load. Short pauses are inserted at fixed intervals to check the condition of each member. Primary dosimetry of the site is performed before any mechanical action. The dosimetrist and one assistant walk a small grid across the planned area. The grid cell size is selected to balance coverage and time. The instrument probe is held at a steady height above the surface. Readings are spoken clearly. The assistant repeats the numbers and writes them into the notebook with a simple code for position. The team leader stays on the clean line and follows the progress on the map with a pencil, marking the cells with values and a symbol for any location that exceeds the expected band. When a local rise is detected, a confirmatory reading is taken from two angles to exclude instrument drift. If confirmed, the cell is marked with a visible sign on the ground so that no one steps there without a plan. Clean and dirty lines are defined as soon as the first grid is finished. Tape or flags are used to mark the boundary. Signs with simple arrows indicate the direction of movement from clean to dirty and back to clean. The rule is repeated by the team leader. There is no backward crossing with dirty boots or tools into the clean corridor. If a tool leaves the dirty sector, it is first wiped and placed in a marked area for later handling. A short rest point is set on the clean side. One container of water and one bench or crate are placed there. No eating is done inside the work sector. Drinking is permitted only at the rest point with the respirator off, and only after hands and gloves are checked for contamination. Timekeeping for hotspots is assigned to one person who carries a watch with a second hand and a small log sheet. This person does not leave the clean line. When a short entry to a high reading cell is required, the timekeeper notes the start time, calls time at fixed intervals, and records the stop time when the executor returns to the clean line. The executive role is rotated according to the plan and individual dose status. If a person shows signs of fatigue or if readings rise faster than expected, the rotation is advanced without delay. Emergency retreat procedures are reviewed on the ground. The path of withdrawal is walked once slowly. The hand signal for immediate retreat is shown again. The radio phrase for retreat is confirmed. A fixed threshold is set for a rapid exit. If the instrument jumps to a level beyond the safe band for the plan, work stops and the team moves to the clean line without discussion. The equipment is left in place if needed. The team regroups at the temporary base and new readings are taken to verify whether the rise was local or general. The shift office is informed through the dispatcher if the threshold event occurs. Waste staging is arranged on the dirty side but near the shortest exit route. Empty sacks are lined inside a container to prevent tearing. Labels and markers are placed on a clean board so that hands do not touch the marker body after contact with waste. When a sack is filled later, it will be tied, labeled with date, sector code, and approximate net weight, and moved along the designated path. The path is traced now with small flags so that the later movement is direct and without turns. A simple screen or sheet is positioned at the edge of the hot cell if shielding is needed for a brief operation. Personal protective equipment is checked one more time at the line. Goggles sit without gaps. The respirator seal is confirmed by a short inhale test. Straps are not over-tightened to avoid early fatigue. Glove cuffs cover the sleeves and a small strip of tape is used only if the local rule prescribes it. Boots are checked for debris at the soles. The person avoids touching the face or adjusting the mask on the dirty side. If adjustment is needed, the person steps back to the clean line, removes gloves if the rule requires, and performs the adjustment with clean hands. Documentation is prepared in parallel. The map receives a clear north arrow and a scale note. The sector boundaries are drawn with a thin line, and the planned first patch is shaded lightly. The initial grid readings are copied as legible numbers. The baseline at the entry point is boxed for clarity. A small table is started on a separate sheet with columns for time, position, action, and reading before and after action. This table will be used after each short cycle of work. The team leader keeps the sheet on the board and writes with slow, clear figures to avoid errors. Coordination with neighboring teams is confirmed over the radio. The team leader states the sector code, the current location relative to a landmark, and the planned direction of movement. The neighboring leaders answer with their directions. This prevents two teams from approaching the same boundary from opposite sides and creating unnecessary crossing of paths. If heavy machinery is scheduled to enter a nearby lane, the team leader confirms the time window and the hand signals for movement. If the machinery arrives earlier than expected, the team steps back to the rest point until the lane is clear. Before the first cycle of work starts, the dosimetrist repeats a short scan along the immediate strip to be processed. The aim is to detect any fragment or patch that would change the plan for the first minutes. If a small object is suspected, a marker is placed and the plan is adjusted to approach it in a controlled manner. If all is within the expected band, the team proceeds. The person with the heaviest task is given a time limit for one pass. The timekeeper notes the start. The team leader reminds the sequence: approach from the cleaner edge, wet the surface if dry, make a single direction movement, step back without pivoting, and report the action with a short phrase. With the temporary base established, the lines drawn, the grid measured, the weather accounted for, the emergency retreat path rehearsed, and the documents prepared, the site is ready for organized work. The team stands at the clean line with tools in hand. The team leader gives the short command to begin. The first cycle is now executed under control of time, dose, and clear movement rules. Protective equipment and tools are issued and checked in a fixed order. Items are laid out on a clean board. Each item has a number. The number is linked to the person or to the team in the issue log. Defects are noted immediately, and defective items are exchanged before leaving the temporary base. Protective clothing forms layers. A light base layer absorbs sweat and reduces skin friction. Over it, a work suit with long sleeves and full-length trousers is worn. Cuffs close at the wrist and ankle. A head covering reduces hair contamination. Goggles protect the eyes from dust. Boots or disposable overshoes provide a continuous barrier from the sole to the lower leg. The local rule prescribes taping sleeve and glove junctions. A short strip of tape is used. Full wrapping is avoided to prevent circulation issues. The suit is kept closed at the neck and waist. Pockets remain empty to avoid carrying dust. The respirator is selected by size and filter type. The type must match the aerosol hazard. Filter cartridges are seated firmly and checked for proper seating. Exhalation and inhalation valves are inspected for debris. A simple fit check is performed. The filter inlets are covered by the hands. The person inhales gently, and the mask must seal against the face without air leaks. If the seal is not achieved, straps are adjusted or another size is issued. The respirator is kept on the face inside the work sector and removed only in the clean line. Spare filters are stored in sealed bags on the clean side and are opened immediately before use. Gloves are selected for dexterity and barrier integrity. Outer gloves are checked for punctures by a quick visual inspection and by gentle pressurization with air. Inner cotton liners may be used to reduce sweat if issued. When a glove contacts a wet, contaminated surface, it is treated as dirty until the end of the cycle. If a tear is observed, the person steps back to the clean line and changes the glove under supervision. Used gloves are placed in a marked waste sack. Individual dosimetry is mandatory. The dosimeter is worn at chest level unless otherwise stated in the instruction. If the device is active, the battery level is confirmed at issue and again at the first rest pause. If the device is passive, The badge is placed in the assigned pocket and not handled during the shift. Reading times are written in the work plan. The team leader or dosimetrist announces reading times to avoid missed entries. Readings are written with time and position. If a reading deviates from the expected range, the team pauses and a second reading is taken with a group instrument. Group instruments are prepared by the dosimetrist. A quick self-test is performed at the temporary base. If a check source is available, the indicated response is compared with the expected band. Probe cables are inspected for damage. The probe is kept at a constant height during scans to maintain consistency. The instrument sounder remains at low volume to avoid masking radio calls. Batteries are counted and a spare set is kept in the clean box. Probes are never placed on the ground in the dirty sector. They are held or suspended on a clean hook between readings. Tools for decontamination are arranged by function. Mechanical tools include brushes with stiff bristles, scrapers, shovels, and small crowbars for lifting fragments. Wet tools include watering cans, low-pressure sprayers, buckets, and rags. Plastic sheeting is used to isolate surfaces or to create clean kneeling pads at the edge of a work area. Tape and marker pens are used for labeling sacks, containers, and temporary signs. A simple handscreen, sheet of dense material on a handle, can be used to reduce exposure from a fixed direction during a brief task. Tools are assigned to people to reduce exchange and confusion. Solutions are mixed at the clean side. The concentration follows the label or the local instruction. The person responsible measures water and detergent with the provided cup. The container is labeled with date, time, and mixture type. Lids are kept closed when not in use. Sprayers are tested with clean water first to confirm pattern and seal. During use, wetting precedes scraping to suppress dust. Excess liquid is avoided to prevent runoff. Rags that become dirty are placed in a bucket for waste and are not reused. Waste handling is planned before work starts. Empty sacks are pre-positioned inside a rigid container to reduce tearing. Each sack receives a label with the sector code, date, and approximate contents. When a sack is filled to the marked line, it is tied, wiped on the outside, and moved along the designated path toward the temporary staging point. Large fragments are wrapped in plastic sheeting and secured with tape. The path for waste movement is short and straight. Crossing into the clean corridor with waste is not permitted. If a transfer across a clean line is required, a handover point with a barrier is created and staffed. Signage and boundary control are maintained throughout. Stakes or flags mark the clean-dirty boundary. Arrows show the permitted direction of movement. A small board near the temporary base lists the current task, start time, and the next reading time for dosimetry. If wind changes direction, the team leader orders a quick adjustment of the boundary and the rest point location. Tape is removed and replaced rather than shifted to avoid loose ends that can catch on boots. Communication equipment includes a portable radio for the team leader and, when available, a second set for the dosimetrist. Call signs are written on the board. The channel is fixed for the shift. A short test is performed after deployment at the site. Spare batteries are kept in the clean box. Headsets are used if machinery operates nearby. Radio discipline is strict. One message at a time, no long exchanges, standard phrasing for location and readings. Timekeeping devices include wristwatches and, when needed, a stopwatch. The timekeeper stays at the clean line and records start and stop times for short entries to hotspots. The schedule for rest and hydration is posted. No unplanned breaks are taken inside the work sector. Hydration occurs at the rest point only, with the respirator removed, and only after hands and gloves are checked for contamination with the group instrument when required by the local rule. Ergonomics and assignment reduce strain. Heavier tools are rotated between people according to the plan and according to individual dose progress. Handles are checked for splinters and wrapped with tape if rough. Working posture is kept neutral, straight back where possible, short strokes with the tool, no pivoting on the heel in the dirty area to avoid spreading dust. The team leader observes for early signs of fatigue and orders short pauses at the clean line if needed. First aid and hygiene items are present at the temporary base. A basic kit includes adhesive bandages, sterile gauze, scissors, tweezers, and saline for eye rinse. The kit is sealed and opened only when needed. A separate bottle of clean water is kept for drinking and is not used for washing tools. Hand wipes for the clean line are stored separately and are not carried into the dirty sector. Smoking materials, food, and personal items do not enter the work sector. Tool maintenance during the shift follows a simple loop. At the end of each short cycle, tools are wiped with a damp cloth at the edge of the dirty sector. If a tool becomes heavily contaminated, it is set aside on a marked pad and replaced from the reserve. At the end of the shift, gross contamination is removed at a designated point before tools are bagged for transport to the decontamination post. Clean and dirty tool areas are never mixed. Documentation accompanies the equipment. The issue log lists each item with its number and the name of the person responsible. The dosimetry log lists instrument serials and reading times. The waste log lists sack count, container numbers, and labels. The tool checklist prevents loss. When a tool leaves the base, a mark is placed. When it returns, the mark is cleared. Missing items are reported at once to avoid leaving them in the sector. At the conclusion of work on a patch, equipment is processed in reverse order. Tools are wiped and staged for bagging. Group instruments are turned off and the probe is capped. The dosimetrist records final readings for the patch. The radio is checked and set to standby. The respirator remains on until the person reaches the clean line and is cleared to remove it. Gloves are removed according to the local sequence to avoid skin contact. Protective clothing is inspected for visible contamination. If contamination is observed, the person proceeds directly to the sanitary post following the clean corridor. Storage conditions protect function. Instruments and radios are kept out of direct sun. Solutions are stored with lids closed and away from the rest area. Spare filters and gloves remain in sealed packaging until needed. The map board stays on a clean support to avoid picking up dust from the ground. Nothing is placed on top of the group instrument or the dosimeter notebook. With protective layers fitted, respirators sealed, dosimeters active, radios confirmed, tools organized, solutions mixed and labeled, waste lines prepared, and documentation opened, the team is fully equipped. The first work cycle can proceed with minimal handling changes, clear boundaries, controlled time, and continuous measurement. This configuration supports short, repeatable actions and reliable records across the shift. The first cycle targets a defined surface patch and a short stretch of road leading to it. The team leader confirms the boundaries on the ground with tape and marks an entry arrow from the cleaner edge toward the dirtier side. The dosimetrist speaks the starting readings for the patch and the adjacent road verge. These numbers are written into the table on the board. The timekeeper announces the start time. The team moves in a fixed sequence that minimizes steps and prevents backtracking. Pre-wetting is performed first to suppress dust. A low-pressure sprayer is used to lay an even film of water with detergent according to the morning mixture. The jet is held close to the surface to avoid aerosol. Cracks, joints, and seams are given an extra pass because fine dust accumulates there. When the surface has a dull sheen, mechanical action begins. Dry sweeping is not used. Brushes with stiff bristles are pushed in one direction only, from the cleaner edge toward the collection line. Each stroke covers a narrow strip. Overlapping is controlled so that no ridge is formed at the edge. Scrapers are used for adhering films on concrete, metal thresholds, and embedded plates. Detached material moves into a shallow windrow at the far side of the patch. The windrow is captured without delay. A shovel team loads the material into a lined rigid container or directly into a labeled sack held open by a stand. The sack is filled to the mark, tied, wiped externally with a damp cloth, labeled with sector code, date, and approximate contents, and moved along the flagged path to the temporary staging point. 2 people carry heavy sacks to reduce strain. The path does not cross the clean corridor. If a crossing is required later, a handover barrier will be used as planned in advance. After the first mechanical pass, a second wet pass is applied. The sprayer lays a thin film again. Rags are used to wipe railings, low parapets, and the upper surfaces of curbs. The wiping motion is straight and one-directional. Rags that become visibly dirty are placed in the waste bucket and not reused. The team leader checks the surface visually for remaining films and residue in joints. No bare hand touches the treated area. If necessary, a light scrape is repeated on stubborn patches, followed by a brief wet wipe. Intermediate dosimetry follows every short subpatch. The dosimetrist scans at a constant height using the same path as the pre-scan. Values are spoken with their cell code and recorded in the notebook. The team leader transcribes the cell readings onto the map grid. If the decrease meets the target band, the cell is shaded as processed. If the decrease is insufficient, the team applies one of the planned options: a second mechanical pass with more thorough crack cleaning, a change in detergent contact time, or removal of a very thin surface layer if the substrate is soil or compacted dust. Decisions are kept brief and tied to the numbers. Road treatment proceeds in parallel in short lengths to maintain access. Asphalt and concrete are treated with the same wet then mechanical sequence. For gravel shoulders, loose material is first stabilized by wetting, then raked with slow strokes to bring fine material to the surface for removal. If a road segment shows persistent readings after 2 cycles, the plan shifts to lifting and bagging the top few centimeters of fines along the edge, while leaving the larger aggregate in place. The removed fines are bagged and labeled as usual. The running surface is re-wetted and brushed again to settle remaining dust. Wheel paths for vehicles are kept clear and are marked with cones to avoid new contamination from foot traffic. Traffic control is continuous. One person acts as a spotter when a vehicle must pass. Hand signals are used to guide slow movement along the designated lane. Engines stay on low idle to limit vibration and dust. No vehicle is allowed to enter the still dirty side of the patch. If a water truck is scheduled, it approaches from the clean direction, stops at the marked line, and sprays only on command. The team steps back to the clean line during spraying. The sprayer returns to the staging point without turning its wheels across the processed strip. Footprint control is enforced at all times. No pivoting on the heel occurs in the dirty sector. Step length is short and paths are straight. The team leader watches for accidental cross-tracks. If a footprint crosses from a dirtier area back into a cleaned strip, that strip is re-wetted and re-brushed before acceptance. At the edge of the patch, a temporary clean pad made from plastic sheeting is used as a kneeling or tool change area. The pad is kept free of loose debris and is moved forward only after the surface in front of it has been processed and scanned. Hydration and short rest are taken on schedule at the rest point only. The timekeeper calls the pause at the planned minute mark. Before the respirator is removed, gloves are checked for wet contamination and wiped if the local rule requires. Drinking is done in a seated position. Conversation is practical and limited to task adjustments. The dosimetrist uses the pause to log totals and to check battery status. The timekeeper announces the end of the pause and work resumes at the next sub-patch, continuing the one-direction sequence. Crack and drain detail is addressed after the main surface is cleared. Small scrapers and narrow brushes remove compacted fines from joints. If a drain grate is present, its perimeter is cleaned first. The grate is lifted only if authorized in the day's plan. If lifting is authorized, a plastic sheet is positioned to receive the grate, and the opening is covered with a temporary screen while the seat and bars are brushed and wiped. Any removed sediment is bagged. The grate is replaced and the area is re-wetted and scanned. If lifting is not authorized, the perimeter is cleaned and the grate surface is wiped without removal. Edge transitions receive special handling to prevent recontamination. The boundary between the processed patch and the still dirty area is given a narrow buffer strip that is wet and lightly brushed at the end of the cycle before tools are carried back. This strip acts as a controlled interface when the team returns for the next cycle. Tools are wiped at the edge on a marked pad. The pad itself is considered dirty and remains in the sector until the end of the shift. Local hotspots are addressed only with the short entry protocol. The timekeeper and dosimetrist stand at the clean line. The executor rehearses the path with the team leader in one sentence. A small hand screen is positioned if exposure is directional. The executor steps in, performs the single action, lift, wrap, bag or push under cover, and steps back without pause. Times and readings are recorded. If the result is satisfactory, the area is rescanned and marked processed. If not, the sequence is repeated by another person or with an adjusted approach. Rotation is enforced to control dose and fatigue. Documentation grows with the cycle. The table receives entries for each sub-patch: start time, actions, intermediate readings, waste count, and pass-fail against the target band. The map is updated at once. Numbers are written clearly to avoid confusion later. If rain begins or wind shifts, a short note is added to the margin. The shift dispatcher is informed only if the change affects timing or requires an altered route for vehicles. Routine weather changes are handled locally by moving the rest point and increasing water use. Quality control concludes the cycle for the patch and the linked road length. The dosimetrist performs a final scan along a simple zigzag path across the patch and along a straight line down the wheel track on the road. Values are read out and compared with the target band. If the surface meets the criteria, the team leader shades the patch and draws a thin line across the road segment to indicate completion. Tools are wiped, sacks are counted at the staging point, and the timekeeper notes the cycle end time. The team steps back to the clean line for a brief check of respirators, gloves, and goggles. The cycle repeats on the next patch according to the same pattern: pre-wet, mechanical removal in one direction, capture and bagging, re-wet and wipe, intermediate scan, corrective pass if needed, detail cleaning, hotspot handling when present, footprint control, traffic coordination, hydration on schedule, final scan, and documentation. The sequence is stable by design. It reduces handling changes, keeps paths predictable, and produces comparable numbers for the map and the end-of-day report. When the planned number of patches and road lengths is reached, or when the time window closes, the team prepares for the final acceptance scan and the move toward decontamination procedures. The second work cycle is reserved for local hotspots. The decision to start it is based on the grid completed earlier and on any new readings taken during the first cycle. The team leader points to the marked cells with elevated values. The dosimetrist confirms them with a fresh pass at a steady height, then lowers the probe close to the surface to assess the gradient. If the signal rises sharply over a small area, the spot is treated as a point source. If the rise is broad and shallow, the spot is treated as a smearable film. The type determines the method and the expected time. Preparation takes place on the clean line. The timekeeper opens a new page and writes the sector code, the cell ID, and the baseline readings. A pre-labeled sack is set on a stand. A sheet of plastic with tape strips already attached lies folded on a clean board. Long-handled tongs, a small shovel, and a scraper are placed within reach. A simple hand screen is brought to the boundary if the spot has a known direction of higher readings, for example near a wall or a beam that casts scattered radiation from one side. The executor rehearses the path with the team leader in one sentence. The path is straight. The action is single. The withdrawal is immediate. For a point source, the protocol is strict. The dosimetrist takes a short confirmation reading from the clean line with the probe forward and the cable behind the body. The timekeeper calls ready. The executor steps from the clean line at a normal pace without running. The tongs are used to lift the fragment if it is small. If the fragment is embedded, the scraper or the small shovel is used to lever it out with one motion. The fragment is dropped onto the center of the plastic sheet. The sheet is folded over the fragment quickly along the taped edges. The wrapped package is placed into the sack. The executor turns the body with small steps and returns along the same path. The timekeeper calls the stop time. The dosimetrist scans the executor's gloves and boots at the boundary. If smear is detected, the gloves are removed and replaced. The boots are wiped with a damp cloth on a marked pad. For a smearable film, the protocol changes. The area is pre-wetted from the clean line using a low-pressure sprayer held low to the surface. The executor enters with a wide scraper and a pre-wet rag. The scraper pulls the thin film toward the collection edge in one direction only. The rag wipes the residual film in straight passes. The material is lifted into the sack with the scraper edge. The executor retreats without pivoting and hands off the rag into the waste bucket at the boundary. The dosimetrist scans the treated strip and the executor's gloves. A second thin wet pass is applied from the boundary if the values remain above the target band. If the decrease is still insufficient, the leader authorizes lifting a very thin surface layer using the small shovel and bagging it as fines. When a hotspot is located on metal, such as a plate or a piece of rebar, the surface is wiped rather than scraped if the plan allows keeping the item in place. A pre-wet rag is pulled in straight lines from the cleaner edge. The dosimetrist measures after each pass. If readings remain high, the leader authorizes removal. The executor uses tongs or the crowbar to free the item, lays it on the plastic sheet, folds, tapes, and bags it. The sack is tied, wiped, labeled, and moved along the flagged path to the staging point. Hands do not touch the label body. The marker is handled by a clean assistant on the board. Times are short by design. The timekeeper uses a wristwatch with a second hand or a stopwatch. Typical entries last tens of seconds. The limit is set in the morning plan based on the expected field. If the limit is reached without completion, the executor stops, returns, and a second person is assigned after a pause. Rotation protects against cumulative load and maintains attention. The order of rotation follows the individual dose status and observed condition. If a person shows rapid breathing, unsteady steps, or difficulty with the mask, the person is removed from the rotation and rests on the clean line under observation. The threshold for emergency retreat is fixed in advance. It is written on the board. If the instrument sounded jumps or the indicator shows a value beyond the safe band for the task, the dosimetrist calls retreat. No discussion follows. The executor steps back at once along the entry path. Tools are left in place if removal takes longer than a step. At the boundary, the dosimetrist checks the executor's boots and gloves. The team regroups at the temporary base. A second reading is taken from the clean line to confirm whether the rise was local or general. The shift dispatcher is informed if the threshold event is confirmed. The spot is then marked for a specialized team or for shielding by machinery. Shielding reduces exposure when a brief action must be performed near a source with a clear direction. The simple hand screen is positioned between the executor and the source. The angle is selected to block the main direction of scatter while allowing the executor to see the tool and the path. The screen is held by a second person only if the plan keeps the second person's stay within limits. Otherwise, the screen is fixed on a stand. The entry time is shortened accordingly. After withdrawal, the screen is scanned and wiped at the boundary. Large or heavy items require coordinated removal. If a metal sheet, a beam fragment, or a dense piece cannot be bagged by one person, the leader requests a two-person lift or a mechanical assist. The path is cleared with flags. The lift is rehearsed with empty hands. On the action, both persons step in together, place the item on the plastic sheet or in a shallow tray, and step back together. If a tray is used, it is carried by the handles to the staging point and placed on a pallet. The dosimetrist scans the tray and the path. The timekeeper records the full interval for both persons. Embedded particles in asphalt or concrete are handled with a controlled chip. The perimeter is pre-wetted and brushed to reduce loose fines. The executor uses a narrow chisel or scraper to lift a small chip around the particle in one motion. The chip and the particle are captured on the plastic sheet. The recess is wiped with a wet rag. The dosimetrist measures at the recess. If readings remain above the band, a second small chip is authorized. The surface is then re-wet and brushed to settle dust. Drain edges and seams are common locations for local rises. If the plan allows, the executor places a temporary screen over the drain opening, wipes the perimeter, lifts the grate onto the plastic, and wipes the seat and bars. Sediment is lifted with a small scoop and bagged. The grate is replaced. The dosimetrist scans the grate surface and the perimeter. If lifting is not in the plan, only the perimeter and the visible bars are wiped. The location is marked for future work by a specialized crew if the decrease is insufficient. Documentation is continuous. For each hotspot, the table records the cell code, the starting reading, the action, the time in, the time out, the intermediate reading if taken, the final reading, the waste item or SAC ID, and any remarks on conditions. The map receives a small symbol for the spot and a number that links to the table row. If shielding was used, a note is added with a sketch of the screen position. If a threshold event occurred, the time and the value are boxed and the dispatcher call is noted. Contamination control at the boundary is strict after each entry. Boots are examined for visible smear or debris. If needed, the soles are wiped on a damp cloth placed on a marked pad. Gloves that touched wet material are considered dirty and are replaced if the local rule requires. The respirator remains on. Goggles are wiped only on the clean line with a clean cloth. No adjustment is made in the dirty sector. If a glove tear is found, the person's hands are scanned on the clean line and washed if contamination is detected. Hydration and rest remain on schedule. Short entries increase breathing effort under the respirator. The timekeeper watches the clock and calls the pause at the fixed interval. The pause takes place at the rest point only. The dosimetrist uses the pause to check the battery and the probe cable and to add totals to the log. The team leader uses the pause to review which hotspots remain and to decide whether to continue the second cycle or return to surface processing. Coordination with neighboring teams continues. If a neighboring team reports movement toward a boundary with their own hotspot, the leaders agree on a time split so that only one team works near the boundary at a time. If machinery is scheduled to pass in a nearby lane, the hand signals are reviewed again and hotspot entries are paused during the pass. Acceptance for each hotspot is simple. The final reading must fall within the target band or lower, measured at the same height and along the same path as the initial scan. The area is then marked as processed on the map. If the reading remains high after 2 attempts, the spot is escalated. It is labeled, fenced with tape, and listed for a specialized crew or for later shielding with heavier means. The team leader notes the escalation in the report. Work then shifts to the next marked spot or returns to the remaining surface patches. The second cycle ends when all marked hotspots in the current sector have been addressed, when the time window closes, or when dose status reaches the planned limit for any team member. Tools are wiped at the edge, sacks are counted and staged, the board is updated, and the team moves back to the clean line. The dosimetrist performed a quick scan of boots and gloves. The leader calls the dispatcher with a brief status. The team prepares for coordination with transport and for the next phase, support by machinery, staging of waste, and preparation for final sector scans before decontamination and exit. Transport and technical support follow a fixed scheme. A transport coordinator is assigned. The person keeps the route sheet, the radio contact with the dispatcher, and the list of loads. Drivers receive the sector code, the approach lane, the standby point, and the hand signals used on site. Windows remain closed. Ventilation is set to internal circulation. Drivers wear the prescribed protective set. Leaving the cab is allowed only on the clean line or at a designated step-off pad. Water and solution supply is scheduled. A water truck or trailer delivers at defined times. The approach is from the clean direction only. The stop line is marked with cones or flags. A short hose with a shut-off valve prevents spills. Containers are filled on a plastic sheet to collect drips. The filling person stands on the clean side with gloves that have not touched waste. Caps are closed at once. The truck departs along the same clean route. If wind shifts toward the rest point, refilling is postponed until the rest point is moved. Waste movement is organized to avoid crossings. Filled sacks are carried by 2 people to a short transfer lane inside the dirty sector. From there, sacks are placed into a rigid bin or onto a tray. The bin is lined with plastic. Labels are written by a clean assistant on the board and handed over without touching the bin. When the bin is full to the line, a lid is closed and strapped. The driver backs to the boundary under guidance from a spotter. The bin is loaded by 2 people or by a small crane if installed. The path to the staging yard is flagged. No turns are made across processed strips. The staging yard is fenced with tape and signs. Pallets are placed on the ground to keep bins off soil. Each pallet position has a code. The code, date, bin number, sack count, and approximate weight are written in the yard log. A simple grid is drawn on the yard plan. Bins are placed in rows with aisles straight and wide enough for a forklift or for 2 people with a stretcher. A tarp is kept ready for sudden rain. Drips or tears are contained with secondary plastic. Nothing leaves the yard without an entry in the log and a radio call to the dispatcher. Vehicle movement inside the sector follows one-way rules. A spotter stands at the corner of any blind bend. Reverse is guided by hand signals. Engines idle at minimum. Horns and alarms are tested at entry. Speed is low to limit dust and to keep control on soft ground. If ruts form, traffic stops. Boards or mats are placed. A second route is opened only after the map is updated and neighboring teams are informed. No vehicle enters a lane marked as processed unless the shift chief authorizes a controlled pass. Machinery is used for defined tasks only. A small excavator removes shallow contaminated soil where readings remain above the band after manual passes. A bulldozer pushes windrows into a loading pocket. A crane lifts heavy items into trays or bins. Each machine has an exclusion zone marked on the ground. Only the signalman enters the zone during a maneuver. Hand signals are standardized. The signalman faces the operator. Taglines are used to control swinging loads. Lifts are slow and are not performed over people. Buckets, hooks, and slings are inspected before use. Slings have visible tags with safe working load. Any frayed sling is rejected. Cabin shielding is applied when required. A sheet or a panel is mounted on the cab side facing the source direction. The panel is fixed with brackets or straps that do not interfere with controls. The operator remains seated. Windows stay closed. The path of approach is straight and has space for immediate withdrawal. Dwell times near known sources are minimized. The dosimetrist observes from the clean line and reads the meter at intervals. If values climb above the planned band, the maneuver stops and the machine retreats. Fueling and maintenance occur in controlled areas. Preferred fueling is outside the sector at a clean post. If on-site fueling is necessary, a plastic sheet and a drip tray are used. The fueling person wears gloves designated for fuel, not for waste. A spill kit is present. Any spill is absorbed with pads and the pads are bagged as waste. Hydraulic leaks are treated the same way. Grease points are serviced only at the clean post. Tire pressure and tracks are checked at standby, not in a processed lane. Wheel chocks are used on slopes. Wheel and track decontamination is performed before exit. A low-pressure spray bar wets tires and tracks. A brush station removes visible dirt. Runoff is directed to a shallow sump lined with plastic. The sump is emptied into sacks with absorbent when full. The driver remains in the cab. The spotter checks the clean line for splashes. If splashes occur, the area is re-wet and brushed before acceptance. The checkpoint is informed that the vehicle has passed a wheel wash. Load security is verified before movement. Bins are strapped. Lids are locked. Trays are netted. The center of mass is kept low. Nothing protrudes beyond the vehicle sides. The driver signs the load sheet with bin numbers and destination. The convoy moves at the posted speed. Passing is not allowed. Radio silence is kept except for necessary position calls. On arrival at the yard, loads are placed onto coded pallets. Straps and nets are checked for damage and are stored in a clean box. Route protection prevents recontamination. Processed strips are bordered by buffer lanes that remain wet until traffic ends. Cones mark the wheel paths. Foot traffic is restricted to the clean corridor. If a crossing is unavoidable, a temporary bridge of boards is placed. The bridge is wiped after use. Boards remain in the dirty sector and are bagged for decontamination at the end of the operation. The map is updated with any new crossing point. Coordination with neighboring teams is kept by radio. Before a machine enters, the team leader calls the sector code, the lane, and the expected time window. Neighboring leaders acknowledge and hold position if they work near the route. If two movements conflict, the dispatcher assigns a sequence. The team pauses during the other team's pass. After the pass, the team checks for dust tracks or splashes and corrects them if present. Documentation covers all technical support. A transport log lists vehicle numbers, drivers, entry and exit times, loads, and destinations. A machinery log lists tasks, start and stop times, fuel use, and any incidents. A yard log lists bin numbers, sack counts, pallet positions, and weather notes. A decontamination log lists wheel washes and sump maintenance. These logs are kept on the board and are copied to the shift office after return. Safety margins are preserved in changing weather. In high wind, machinery pauses near exposed edges. In rain, slopes are avoided and mats are used on clay. In fog, spotters carry whistles and stay within clear line of sight. At high temperatures, cycle length is shortened, and operators rotate to limit heat load in cabs and under respirators. At low temperatures, hoses and valves are checked for stiffness before pressurizing. End of cycle housekeeping prepares acceptance. Windrows are removed. Edges of processed patches receive a light wet pass. Loose debris along wheel paths is brushed and bagged. Cones and flags are reset to show completed and pending areas. The hand washing bottle at the rest point is replaced if empty. The board is cleaned of old tape and crowded notes. The map is redrawn with a thin line to show the new boundary of processed ground. At the planned time, the team requests the final water pass if required by the plan. A fine spray settles remaining dust. The sprayer departs along the clean lane. The dosimetrist performs a verification scan along the traffic path and across the processed patches. If numbers match the target band, the team leader announces readiness for final sector scans and acceptance. Tools are staged, vehicles are set to stand by, and the team moves to the clean line to prepare for decontamination and exit procedures. Final quality control, personal decontamination, and exit follow a fixed sequence. The goal is to confirm the effect of work, prevent transfer of contamination beyond the sector, and record dose and materials accurately. Actions are performed without haste and in the same order every time. The dosimetrist begins with the verification scan of the processed ground. A zigzag walk covers the entire patch with the probe held at a constant height. Readings are spoken with time and position codes. The team leader follows at the clean line and marks the numbers on the map grid. Road wheel paths, edges, joints, and drain perimeters receive a separate straight line scan. If values fall within the target band, the cells are shaded as complete. If a local rise is found, a short corrective pass is executed at once or the cell is flagged for the next shift, depending on time and dose status. Acceptance by the section senior occurs when the verification scan is finished. The senior arrives by clean lane. The team keeps position on the clean line. The dosimetrist presents the baseline, intermediate, and final numbers. The map, The table of actions, the waste log, and the transport log are shown. The senior walks the perimeter along the clean corridor and checks a sample of cells with the group instrument. If numbers agree with the table, acceptance is recorded in the work log with date, time, sector code, and signature. Remarks about remaining flagged cells or weather constraints are written in clear language. Tools are consolidated next. On the dirty side, each item is wiped of loose material at a marked pad. Heavy contamination is not removed on site. Such items are placed in a to-decon bundle. Brooms and brushes are tapped only over the pad and then bagged for processing. Scrapers and shovels are wiped and bagged if required by the plan. Sprayers are depressurized, nozzles are capped, and bottles are closed. Plastic sheeting used as pads is rolled inward and tied. Waste sacks at the staging point are counted and compared with the log. The count is spoken aloud and written in the yard log. Bins are strapped and labeled. The driver receives the final list and moves the load to the yard under guidance. Boundary controls are removed in reverse. Flags and tape at the clean-dirty line are pulled and placed in a waste sack if they were inside the sector. Clean side signs are packed for reuse. The rest point is broken down. Benches or crates are wiped on the dirty side and bagged if designated single use. The map board remains on the clean side. The radio is set to standby. The timekeeper notes the moment of end of field operations. Movement to the sanitary corridor begins at the team leader's command. Tools for decontamination travel in a marked bundle. The team walks single file along the clean lane. No one steps out of the lane. The dosimetrist performs a quick scan of glove exteriors and boot tops before crossing into the corridor area. If smear is visible, gloves are changed at the boundary. If mud is present on soles, soles are wiped on a damp pad before entry. At the sanitary post, the undressing and wash sequence is fixed and posted. A post attendant oversees the order. The individual path is initial monitoring, arrow removal of outer items, arrow shower arrow, final monitoring, arrow dressing in base clothing. The person follows the sequence without skipping steps. Initial monitoring uses a handheld frisker or a portal monitor. The person stands with feet apart and arms slightly raised. The scan covers head, shoulders, sleeves, chest, abdomen, back, gloves, thighs, calves, and boot tops. If a portal is used, the person passes through and waits for the signal. If the signal indicates above band contamination on the outer surface, the person proceeds to removal of outer items as planned. If the signal indicates a localized area, the attendant notes the area for special attention during shower. Removal of outer protective items occurs in the dirty undressing zone. The order is tool set down, outer gloves off, goggles off, head covering off, suit unfastened and rolled outward, boots or overshoes off on the threshold pad, respirator off last. Outer gloves are turned inside out while removing. Goggles are handled by the strap. The suit is peeled away without shaking. Boots are placed sole down on the marked rack. The respirator is removed by the straps without touching the face. All items go into designated containers, reusable to the decon bin, disposable to the waste bin. Hands do not touch the outside surfaces of removed items. The shower is taken in the wash zone. Water temperature is moderate. The sequence is posted: hair, face, neck, arms, torso, back, legs, feet. Soap is applied to hair and skin. Particular attention is paid to hairline, behind ears, wrists, fingernails, and underarms. A soft brush is used for nails. The person does not scrub the face aggressively. The goal is thorough coverage. Eyes are rinsed with clean water only. The person does not leave the shower until soap is fully rinsed. A clean towel is used once and placed in a marked hamper. Final monitoring occurs in the clean zone. The person steps onto the clean mat and is scanned again with a handheld frisker or passes the portal monitor once more. The sequence is the same as at entry. If the reading is within the clean band, the person proceeds to dress. If a localized area remains above band, the attendant marks the area and sends the person back for a targeted rewash. If readings still remain above after the second wash, a supervisor is called. The area is rechecked with a second instrument. If confirmed, the person remains under observation and a physician is notified according to the site protocol. Respirator handling follows the local rule. If reusable, the facepiece is placed in a bin for cleaning and disinfection. Filters that have been used are removed and disposed of in the designated container unless the instruction requires return for logging. If disposable respirators are used, they go to the waste container after removal by straps. Spare filters stored on the clean side and not opened remain for future use. Instrument return and dose recording are performed at the instrument table. The individual dosimeter is read if active. The value and time are written into the personal dose card and the shift log. If passive badges are used, they are removed and placed in labeled sleeves for processing. Replacement badges are issued for the next shift. Group instruments are turned off, probes are capped, serial numbers are checked against the issue log, and battery levels are noted. Any malfunction observed during the shift is described in the remarks field. The dosimetrist signs the instrument return line. Tool and equipment decontamination proceeds at the tool wash station. Reusable tools are rinsed with low-pressure water over a collection tray, wiped with detergent solution, and rinsed again. Runoff is collected in a lined sump. The sump contents are handled as waste according to the plan. Clean tools are placed on a drying rack in the clean zone. Reusable goggles are washed and dried. Reusable protective suits, if issued, are processed by the laundry post under separate rules. Disposable items are counted and recorded in the waste log by type and quantity. Waste documentation is closed before exit. The yard log receives the final bin count, sack count, pallet codes, and weather notes. The transport log receives vehicle exit times and destinations. The decontamination log receives wheel wash cycles and sump servicing notes. The map is updated with the final processed boundary and any flagged cells for future work. The team leader draws a thin line around accepted patches and writes the acceptance time. The board is wiped. All paper logs are placed in a folder for the shift office. Vehicle exit through the checkpoint uses the posted sequence. The driver stops at the wheel wash. Tires and tracks are wetted and brushed. The spotter confirms no splash onto the clean corridor. The vehicle rolls to the portal monitor if installed for vehicles. If the monitor indicates above band contamination on a wheel or underbody, the vehicle returns to the wash for a second pass. If readings remain high, the dispatcher is informed and the vehicle is diverted to the decontamination bay. If readings are within band, the driver proceeds to the barrier. The time is recorded by the checkpoint officer. Personal exit is recorded at the checkpoint office. Names are checked against the entry list. Exit time is written into the register. Any remarks about symptoms, equipment failures, or threshold events are noted for the shift report. The team leader gives a short radio call to the dispatcher with sector code, out of zone, and head count. The radio is then set to the base channel. Contingencies are handled on the spot. If a person reports headache, dizziness, or nausea at the sanitary post, the medic examines the person and may order rest and observation. If a skin abrasion is found under the glove line, the area is washed again, covered with a sterile dressing, and recorded. If a small cut occurred during work, the tetanus status is checked according to the medical record and the site rule. These actions are logged and handed off to the evening medical check at base. Handover to the next shift is prepared while still at the post. The team leader writes a short note for the incoming leader. Processed area, flagged cells, remaining materials, yard status, route condition, and any equipment constraints. The note references the map codes and the time of acceptance. The dispatcher receives a copy or an oral summary according to local practice. When all checks are complete, the team boards the transport in base clothing. Windows remain closed. Ventilation is set to internal circulation until the vehicle clears the checkpoint. The convoy departs along the clean lane. The dosimetrist keeps the folder with logs on the lap. The next phase is the return to base, evening meal, medical check, clothing and tool servicing, and entry of numbers into the shift summary. Evening routines begin on arrival at base. The convoy stops at the assigned bay. Engines are turned off. Doors open on the signal from the transport coordinator. Head count is taken at the vehicle. The team walks in line to the shift office with the documents folder. The dispatcher notes return time. The map and logs are handed to the clerk for copying. Personal passes are checked and returned. Radios are placed on the charging rack with labels showing unit and time. The canteen serves a fixed meal. Seating is assigned by shift. Food is plain and high in calories to replace energy used during physical work. A typical tray contains a protein portion, a carbohydrate portion, and vegetables. Bread is issued by slice count. Tea or compote is provided. Water is available at a dispenser. Salt is used in normal amounts unless a medic has given other instructions. No alcohol is issued. Smoking is allowed only at marked areas after the meal. The team eats without hurry. The table is wiped if this is the local rule. Trays are returned. The team moves to the medical post on schedule. The evening medical check is short and uniform. Medic measures blood pressure and pulse. A second worker records numbers in the log. Temperature is taken if the daily bulletin requires it. The medic asks about headache, nausea, dizziness, throat discomfort, chest pain, shortness of breath, skin irritation, and unusual fatigue. Answers are brief and precise. The medic inspects exposed skin for redness or abrasions at glove lines and boot tops. If an abrasion is found, it is cleaned and covered with a sterile dressing. If symptoms are present, the person sits in the observation area for 10 to 15 minutes. A second set of vital signs is taken. If values remain outside the allowed band, the person is referred to a physician. The referral is written into the medical log and the shift chief is notified. Dose accounting is consolidated in the evening. Personal dose cards from the sanitary post are checked against the instrument table entries. Values are added to cumulative totals for the operation. If a person approaches the cumulative limit set in the current directive, the shift chief is alerted. The person is placed on light duty or removed from hot work until the review date. The clerk updates a wall chart that shows each team member's cumulative dose with a simple bar and a date. Discrepancies between active devices and passive badges are noted for later reconciliation. Devices with irregular behavior are tagged for testing. Clothing and hygiene follow fixed steps. Base clothing worn during transport is laundered according to facility rules. Showers are available again at base. The posted sequence is the same as at the sanitary post. Towels are issued and returned to a hamper. Foot care prevents blisters. Feet are dried. Socks for the next day are selected dry and intact, and any hot spot on the skin is covered with a small pad. Nails are trimmed if needed. Shaving is done if the respirator fit requires a smooth face. Reusable gear is serviced. Goggles that returned from the sanitary post are washed in detergent, rinsed, and air-dried. Reusable face pieces, if used, are cleaned and disinfected in a separate bin and laid to dry. Belts, straps, and buckles are checked for wear. Any broken item is tagged and placed in the repair box. Disposable items are counted by type for the waste register. Spare filters that remained sealed during the day are kept for the next issue. Filters opened and not used are handled according to the local rule, usually disposal. Tools are maintained at the tool post. Metal edges on scrapers are inspected and dressed with a file. Brush heads are checked for bristle loss and replaced if bare. Sprayers are flushed with clean water. Nozzles are soaked to remove residue. Hoses are hung to drain. Buckets and trays are rinsed over a collection sump. The sump level is checked. If it reaches the mark, absorbent is added and the batch is bagged and moved to the waste yard. Each service tool is marked as ready on the checklist. Missing tools are reported at once. Instruments receive attention at the instrument table. Batteries are recharged or replaced. Probe cables are wiped and coiled. Connectors are checked for looseness. Self-test is run where applicable. Response to a check source is compared with the expected band. Deviations are logged for the technician. Serial numbers are matched to the issue log. The dosimetrist writes remarks about any field behavior that affected readings, such as intermittent sounder or unstable needle. Instruments are placed on the ready shelf with tags facing outward. Documentation is centralized. The clerk enters patch areas, road lengths, sack counts, bin numbers, and final readings into the shift summary. Weather notes are added in a separate column. Flagged cells are listed with codes and short remarks. The contamination map is updated on clean drafting film. Accepted patches are shaded. Boundaries are redrawn with a thin line. A copy is posted on the wall. Another copy goes to the section office. The shift chief signs the daily page when numbers are complete. The debrief is brief and factual. The shift chief gathers team leaders for 10 to 15 minutes. Each leader reports sector code, start and end times, operations performed, instruments used, deviations, flagged cells, and incidents. The dispatcher notes any transport delays. The machinery coordinator reports fuel status and maintenance needs. The medical representative reports any referrals. The chief issues instructions for the next day's priorities based on flagged cells and route conditions. Requests for materials are confirmed. Filters, gloves, sacks, plastic sheeting, detergent, tool spares, and batteries. The time for morning briefing is fixed. Communication with family follows base rules. Calls are allowed at posted times if lines are available. Messages can be left at the office. Writing materials are provided in a small room. Personal information about operations is not discussed. Call duration is limited to allow access for others. After calls, the person returns to quarters. If calls are not possible, the person can leave a message for later transmission according to the facility's practice. An information bulletin is posted on a board near the dormitory entrance. It lists next day's weather forecast, expected wind direction, temperature range, and precipitation. It lists road conditions on main routes, checkpoint times, and any changes to sanitary post procedures. A health note reminds hydration targets and respirator fit rules. A safety note may list a recent incident and the corrective measure. The bulletin shows meal times and quiet hours. The date and the posting time are written at the top. Quarters are simple. Bunk assignments are posted. A quiet period begins at the stated hour. Windows may remain closed if dust is present. Heating or fans are used as needed. Personal items are kept in a small locker. Wet items are not hung in the room. A drying room is provided. Lights near beds are used for short periods only. Conversations are kept low. Earplugs are available on request. An evacuation plan is posted by the door. The nearest exit and the assembly point are marked. Security rules are reviewed by the duty officer. Entry and exit are controlled. Badges are worn inside the base. Doors are kept closed. Smoking is allowed only at marked points outside. Open flames are not allowed in quarters. Electrical outlets are used within limits. Extension cords are not daisy-chained. The duty officer walks the corridor at intervals and notes any issues in a log. Preparation for morning begins before sleep. The person packs the small bag with base clothing, socks, and personal items. The pass is placed in the sleeve. The alarm is set to the posted wake-up time. The map copy for the team leader is folded and stored with the documents. The tool request list is left at the store window. Bottles for morning water are placed near the door. The person checks that shoes are dry and that laces are intact. The respirator size used during the day is noted for the next issue. Health monitoring continues informally. If a person notes delayed headache or nausea, the duty medic is informed. The medic takes vitals and records the time and the complaint. If symptoms persist, the person is moved to observation. The team leader is notified. The person may be reassigned for the next day depending on the physician's decision. Records are kept with date, time, and shift code. Lights out occurs at the posted time. Exceptions are granted for late arriving units who use low light and keep noise minimal. The corridor lights remain on low level for safety. The duty officer notes the time in the log and checks the fire exits. The base enters the night schedule. The shift office continues data entry and prepares the morning issue sheets. Drivers receive the first convoy time. The dispatcher drafts the route list. The chief reviews the map and signs the final summary. The evening program ends with stable conditions, meals completed, medical checks logged, doses consolidated, tools serviced, instruments charged and tested, waste numbers recorded, maps updated, next day priorities posted, and quarters quiet. The team rests according to schedule. The next sequence will repeat in the morning with wake-up, checks, briefing, and movement to the checkpoint under the current plan. End-of-day consolidation places the work of a single shift into the larger operation. The shift chief, the dispatcher, the dosimetrist, the machinery coordinator, the yard clerk, and the medic complete their sections. The objective is to compare plan and fact, record numbers in a uniform format, and adjust the next day's plan. Plan versus fact is reconciled first. Processed surface area, treated road length, number of completed grid cells, and count of resolved hotspots are compared with the morning target. The map shows each accepted patch with a time mark. The table lists actions with start and end times, intermediate readings, and final readings. Deviations are coded by cause, weather, access restrictions, instrument downtime, machinery delay, personnel rotation, or dose limit reached. Where work was deferred, the reason and the cell code are written in clear terms. If the team exceeded a time window without acceptance, the patch is marked pending verification and remains outside the accepted boundary. Dose compliance is checked for each person. The personal card value is read from the sanitary post entry and added to the cumulative total for the operation. Any person near the cumulative limit set by the directive is flagged. The roster for the next day is adjusted to remove flagged persons from hot tasks and to place them on light duties or reserve. The dosimetrist reviews differences between active device readings and passive badge data from previous processing cycles. Instruments that showed irregular behavior are listed for bench testing or calibration. If a threshold event occurred during the shift, the time and value are boxed and carried forward to the incident log. Time analysis follows. The dispatcher enters convoy departure and arrival times, checkpoint queue times, wheel wash durations, and on-site movement windows. The shift chief compares the actual work window with the plan. If queues or overlapping machinery windows cause delays, the route list and the machinery schedule are revised. If repeated short pauses were needed for heat mitigation, cycle length is reduced for the next day, and an additional rest point is placed on the clean line. If road conditions cause speed reductions, the route is shifted to a firmer lane or boards are requested. Quality outcomes are summarized by the dosimetrist and the section senior. Accepted cells are counted and listed by code. Flagged cells are grouped by reason. Residual smear above band after 2 passes, suspected embedded fragment, drain perimeter not authorized for lifting, or access blocked by machinery. If patterns appear, such as consistent residuals near curbs or along windward edges, the next plan includes targeted tools, longer detergent contact time, or a shallow lift of fines on a narrow strip. Any cell escalated for specialized shielding or removal receives a unique tag and is entered into the specialized team queue. The map is updated to a clean copy. Baseline values, intermediate scans, and final readings are retained in the notebook. Only final acceptance boundaries and flagged cells appear on the posted map. The clean copy shows entry and exit routes, rest points, sanitary post location, yard location, and processed boundaries with dates. A revision mark and a signature line record who prepared and who approved the map. The previous version is filed. The file contains the work plan, instrument serials, dose table, transport sheet, yard sheet, incident log, and medical summary. Inventory and equipment status are recorded next. The storekeeper post counts for gloves, filters, sacks, plastic sheet, detergent, tape, markers, batteries, rags, and absorbent. Minimum stock levels are shown on the board. Items at or below the reorder point are listed for procurement. Tool service tickets show which scrapers need edges dressed, which sprayers need seals, and which hoses need replacement. Instruments are listed with battery state, check source response, and any notes. Calibration due dates are checked. Radios are placed on charge and labeled with unit and time. Spare headsets are inspected. Waste management is reconciled. Sack count by sector code, bin numbers, pallet positions, and approximate weight by bin are tallied. The yard grid is updated. Chain of custody entries show the time of arrival at the yard and the person who signed. If the yard approaches capacity, the yard clerk calls the transport coordinator to schedule removal to the central facility. Any torn sack or wet bin is entered as a defect, contained with secondary plastic and queued for rework. The sump level at the tool wash and wheel wash is checked and logged. If absorbent was used, the batch is weighed or estimated and added to the day's waste total. Safety and incident review is brief and precise. Near-miss events, emergency retreats, glove tears, fog periods, high wind intervals, and machinery reversals near blind corners are listed. For each entry, a corrective measure is attached. Shift of the rest point, additional tape boundary, extra spotter at a bend, or change in hand signals. If a person reported symptoms at the sanitary post or base, the medic's note is included with time and outcome. If a tool was left in the sector and later found, the loss and recovery are recorded to prevent recurrence. Coordination with neighboring teams is formalized for the next day. Boundaries and movement directions are confirmed by radio and written in the route list. Machinery windows are sequenced to avoid overlap at shared lanes. Water delivery is timed to arrive after the first manual pass rather than during it if dust control can be maintained. If weather forecasts indicate wind from a new direction, entry routes and the position of the rest point are changed accordingly. If rain is forecast, drain perimeter work is deprioritized and heavier items are scheduled to use firm ground early. The next day's plan is drafted with codes, times, and numbers. Objectives use measurable targets, square meters to be processed, meters of road to be treated, count of hotspots to be addressed, and threshold values for acceptance. Personnel assignments reflect dose status and observed condition. Rotation orders for short entries to hotspots are listed by name. A backup plan is written for instrument failure, which spare units to issue and which tasks to postpone. A simple decision line is drawn for weather. Wind above a set speed triggers increased water use and reduced cycle length. Precipitation above a set rate triggers route change. Visibility below a set range triggers paired work with line-of-sight checks. Records are finalized and signed. The shift chief signs the daily summary. The dispatcher signs transport sheets. The yard clerk signs the yard log. The dosimetrist signs the instrument table and the dose consolidation page. The medic signs the medical summary. Copies are placed in the section file and, where required, in the central office file. Sensitive personal medical data remain in the medical file under the medic's control. Logs are stored according to the retention rule posted for the operation. Personnel status is updated. The roster for the morning is posted outside the shift office. Names, roles, and report times are listed. Persons on observation or light duty are marked. Replacements are requested if the roster drops below the minimum number for a team. If a person is scheduled for rest due to cumulative dose, the date of return to hot work is noted. Training needs identified during the day are written on a separate sheet for the weekly briefing. With numbers consolidated and signatures in place, the day's work is positioned in the overall operation. The accepted boundary moves outward by a measurable amount. Access routes stay open. Flagged cells are defined and queued. Waste is contained and logged. Instruments are ready for use after charge and check. Protective gear is stocked to minimum levels. The next day's plan is written with clear targets, routes, and schedules. The base enters the night routine. The operation continues on the next shift under the current directive. The day has been completed. The tasks were performed in the planned order. Morning checks were passed. Equipment and instruments were issued. The convoy moved through the checkpoint. The sector was entered by the clean route. Baseline readings were recorded. Boundaries were set. Work cycles were carried out with control of time and dose. Surface patches and short road lengths were processed. Dust was suppressed with water. Films and fines were removed. Waste was bagged, labeled, and staged. Local hotspots were addressed by short entries with rotation. Readings before and after actions were logged. Where the decrease met the target band, cells were accepted. Where values remained high, cells were flagged for specialized work. Machinery support was used under signals and exclusion zones. Loads were secured and moved to the yard. Wheel and track washes were completed. Sumps were managed. Routes were kept one way to reduce crossings. The yard log, transport log, and waste log were updated. Final scans confirmed the effect on processed ground and wheel paths. Acceptance was recorded by the section senior. Personal decontamination was performed at the sanitary post in the posted order. Instruments were returned and checked. Individual doses were read and added to cumulative totals. Reusable tools and gear were washed and dried. Disposable items were counted for the register. At base, food, water, and rest were provided on schedule. Evening medical control was done. Any symptoms were recorded and managed. Documentation was consolidated. The map was updated. Deviations and incidents were listed with corrective measures. The roster was adjusted to respect dose limits and observed condition. The result of one shift was added to the larger operation. The accepted boundary moved forward by a measured amount. Access routes stayed open. Flagged cells were defined and queued. Materials and instruments were prepared for the next issue. The plan for the following day was written with clear targets and routes. This account is closed at lights out. The team rests. The next sequence will repeat with the same structure: checks, entry, measured work, control, decontamination, and reporting. The objective remains stable: reduce contamination, secure movement, and keep records clear. If this calm, factual narrative was useful, you may like and save the video for later listening. New episodes will follow the same simple format. Thank you for watching.